Welcome back to Romantasy versus Reality. I'm Grace.
And I'm Aaron.
This week's episode is going to be focused on chapters 12 through 18 of the first ACOTAR book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Just as a reminder, there will be spoilers in our episode, and we do swear and curse. It's R-rated. We cover R-rated content. There's some unpopular opinions and maybe some hot takes. And let's start off today with, what are we drinking?
First of all, I'm repping my Alaskan Brewery shirt.
You're really trying to get sponsored by these drinking companies, aren't you?
Well, you got to make money somehow. Actually, tonight I made my go-to tiki drink, which is 3 dots and a dash.
Okay.
As with all tiki drinks, like way too many ingredients in it. But I have to say, it's one of my favorite of the common tiki drinks. What about you?
I'm having an elderflower gin and tonic twist. I didn't have any tonic, so I chose to use a Bellini Bliss bubbly, which has peach, pineapple, and mango flavors. And I added elderflower liqueur, and I have this really beautiful purple Empress gin. Hold it up for the camera. You can see how beautiful and purple it is. And I was so angry when I added it to my drink because the final cocktail is this kind of weak pink color. Just looks so sad. It's delicious, but I was expecting more of the purple color. I don't know why. I took chemistry. I understand how diffusion works. It didn't work out the way I was hoping.
Did you try adding mint to it?
And powdered sugar?
Yeah, it's delicious.
You can taste that, can't you?
It will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life.
This one time I tried to make a julep?
Yeah, a mint julep.
A mint julep, but we didn't have mint at home, so I took spearmint extract and extra powdered sugar to try to cover up the flavor because I put way too much. What did you say it tasted like?
Liquid toothpaste.
Liquid toothpaste. When we talk about it now, though, I can taste it. I won't make that drink again.
It is haunting.
So we're going to get into our summary part of the episode. This is chapters 12 through 18 of the first book. In chapter 12, Feyre tries to make a map. It's kind of awkward. She says, I can't really write, so no one can understand it if they read it, which honestly is probably a good thing if you're trying to make a map of places you could escape. But she makes this map that no one else can read that she doesn't really get around to marking a lot of because Tamlin immediately shows up and he's injured. She bandages his injured hand, very Beauty and the Beast, if you remember when they touched, she didn't shudder.
Yes,
my paw.
It was
right out of the movie.
A vicious wound, but somehow did not require stitches.
Yeah. The bog's venom or poison or whatever it was slows the healing of the wound so that they can kill the High Fae. She bandages his injured hand and he's all, how did you do this? And you can still use the hand. And she goes, oh, I had to learn how to do it. I had to be able to pull the bowstring the next day. And she's desperately trying not to ogle his blood-covered muscles, which she can magically see through the rips in his tunic. Chapter 13.
It's the fan that's constantly blowing on him to keep his hair flowing.
That's right, Fabio. He goes everywhere with it, I'm telling you.
Oh, he does.
In chapter 13, she tries to write a letter and discovers the mural, conveniently, which tells us the entire story of Prythian and how it began up to the war. And then Lucian tells her how to snare the Suriel. In chapter 14, she ensnares the Suriel, only to learn that Tamlin is the High Lord of the Spring Court. Oh my god, totally didn't see that coming. The Suriel tells Feyre about Hybern, which is another kingdom, and it's king, not High Lord, but king, and one of his escaped generals, but they're interrupted by the Naga. Chapter 15, Tamlin saves her from the Naga. Feyre decides she's going to take the Suriel's advice to stay with the High Lord. We'll talk about that later. Chapter 16, we finally learn that the Fae can lie, and that iron does absolutely nothing to them. Tamlin offers Feyre friendship, and she admits she wants to paint, which is, I guess, kind of big for her.
Yeah.
At this point, she is now openly admiring his body and his reactions to her. We'll talk about that a little bit later, too. Chapter 17 is when we find the summer court fairy whose wings were ripped off. Tamlin's carrying him into the manor. Feyre wakes up from this horrible nightmare she's having about killing the Naga, and she goes down to find this dying fairy and holds his hand so he doesn't die alone. And that's when we learn that Tamlin's power used to be able to cure these kind of wounds, to heal them, but now he can't. And also that Lucien has a very weak stomach for tortured Fae. Feyre shows remorse again at the end of this chapter for killing Andras. In chapter 18, we get Lucien's tragic backstory, aka why he can't hold his stomach whenever he sees another Fae get tortured. And Tamlin and Feyre go on the world's most awkward date. And Feyre gets an apology from Lucien for not coming when she screamed. Like,
really?
He did not come for her when she screamed like he promised he would. No, it's not.
Phrasing.
He didn't seek her out in the woods as he promised.
Ah, there we go.
When she screamed. Why don't we talk about your thoughts on these chapters?
Feyre's character changes a fair amount over the chapters. She goes from her wit being bitter to more of a sharp, fun, witty dialogue, which is a welcome change, is less annoying. We finally get action. There's a fight scene.
We do.
Which is fun. The Naga. That was kind of cool.
Fighting action, but they go somewhere. They leave the fucking manor together, not just to go hunting.
That's true. There was a lot of Beauty and the Beast vibes with
so many.
The bandaging of the wound.
Yes.
The illiterate Belle going to the study.
There's an actual scene that's like straight out of the movie in the next chapters where he takes her to the gallery. The gallery is to Feyre as the library was to Belle.
Right.
But we see that in the next set of chapters. We get the library. It does sound amazing, though.
Stand out for me, though. Alice gives zero fucks for Feyre's shit. She's rapidly becoming my favorite character. She's like
the Aubrey Plaza of the books.
It's a great exposition dump without being an exposition dump, but I love the whole like, yeah, no, you're kind of dumb. This is what's going on. I knew all along. You're not as smart as you think you are. Yeah, I really appreciate Alice. Just kind of quickly putting her in her place.
Alice is definitely one of my favorite characters. I can say with 100% certainty that she has a very succinct and blunt way with words that I appreciate the entire rest of the way throughout this book and into the next. I love Alice's character.
And then, of course, Tyrion Lannister's tragic backstory. Lucian's tragic backstory.
Wrong series?
Yeah, it's same.
Same, huh?
Well, maybe not quite as dark that we know of, but
I mean, he has to kill his own brother.
Inspiration was drawn from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that.
Which of course takes inspiration elsewhere. I understand it's the circle of life.
I agree.
There are no new ideas. There are only 90 or 100 plots that exist in the entirety of literature. So
that's generous. I would have said like 80 or something.
I only say that because that's actually a book and I had to read it, or we referenced it in high school, I should say.
We didn't really talk a lot about tropes when we were making notes for the show this week, but that is kind of a trope of its own, right? The plucky side character who's a little sassy, a little snarky, tragic backstory, but still funny.
Well, humor is a mature coping mechanism, according to the DSM. So
that explains why you make so many jokes at my expense.
Yes.
Duly noted.
Look, but
this one's more purple.
That is purple.
I added extra gin to this one. Oh, it matches my chair. This is what ADHD is like, in case anyone's wondering. Yeah, so mature coping mechanism. Lucian has a mature coping mechanism for the horrific trauma he's gone through of watching his lover be slaughtered in front of him and then having 3 of 6 of his brothers chase him down to kill him when he denounces his claim to the High Lord's throne.
At least it wasn't all
Seat?
6, I guess.
Yes, I can't wait until you meet his eldest brother, my favorite.
I guess it
Ooh.
really isn't a trope. It isn't so used that.
I don't know. I kind of think he does fall into that trope. Like I said, plucky, snarky side character deals with everything through humor. Also a great foil for our main character. And in this particular case for Tamlin, because he's very ineloquent. We'll say it that way. He's articulate, but not always. Not when he needs to be, it feels like anyway. Let's start with Lucian, right? So we'll move on into talking about characters. Lucian starts to show his hand a bit at the end of these chapters. He actually likes Feyre. He says, I think I'm starting to like you for a murdering human. I have always been one of those people who I'm looking at their actions and not
Right.
their words. And if he didn't like her, he probably wouldn't tell her that he's in hearing distance to come save her. I mean, I guess he could, but he gave her a weapon. He armed her before she went to meet the Suriel. He gave her the information to track down the Suriel. After that, when he apologizes to her, he gives her a valuable jewel hunting knife. Not just as an apology, but I mean, he does say, don't put it in my back. But I don't really think he believes she will. I don't think he believes she will. At this point, I think Lucian has grown attached to Feyre. And as readers, we know that their time is running out. The Blight is a person, and that person is coming for them. They have a curse that's coming to an end. So they're running very short on time, which they've already said. We're running out of time. He says that the first time we meet him. However, I feel like it's not just because they're running out of time. I think despite himself, Lucian actually likes her. I think he likes her sass. She's not afraid to talk back.
I think part of it is he's just bored talking to Tamlin probably at this point.
Who would it be? No offense.
I mean, he gives her a knife and he's like, don't stab at my back. But in reality, unless that knife's made of ash, it doesn't really matter, right?
Well, we know that's not true because she killed the Naga. She slit its frickin' throat with a regular old knife.
But
he's high fae.
Lucian's
and the Naga
high fae. And yeah, right.
Right. However, so this is something you'll learn later on, right? The fae can kill each other without ash arrows. They don't need ash arrows to kill each other. Sure, that does help because the ash slows their healing power. It's kind of like a magical blocker, but they can be killed without an ash arrow. If you plunge that into his heart, he's going to have a hard time healing from it. If you plunge it into his throat, like she did to the Naga when she had that fit of rage or terror or whatever instinct she wants to call it, because that's what she says, that's still going to leave a mark. It's less likely, it's more likely to kill him and less likely he can heal from it, even as a high fae.
To me, it still came off as like more so of a joke, like, yeah, haha.
Yeah.
Don't put it in my back. Not that it'll matter.
I didn't really get that vibe, right? I didn't get the not that it'll matter. I think it was don't put it in my back. Not because I think you will, but just because I'm being funny to remind you. I think it was an affectionate jab, much like the jokes you make at my expense.
At the end of the day, even as an emissary, hopefully he can defend himself. Although
I would hope so.
Feyre is Mary Sue-like in her.
I think she tried to paint her not Mary Sue-like. Her aim with a bow makes sense. She has spent the last 5 years hunting for her family, and she even tells Tamlin, my aim is the first thing that I worked on. It's the first thing I developed because if I couldn't hit anything, we didn't eat. From that close, how close she was, her aim and her ability to strike a target makes complete sense. Outrunning them seems a little strange. I think she had a little bit of a head start. They didn't maybe expect her to run. And she had the Suriel to distract them. So that made sense. Her plunging her knife in there made sense because your instinct is going to be to fight for your life. If someone is threatening your life, you're going to fight back. It is why we call it a fight or flight instinct. But they hesitate really long for people or Faye trying to kill her. Like they give her every opportunity to off them.
And I could write some of that off to underestimating her, right? Like they're just wanting to toy with her.
Yeah.
My problem is not so much with that. It's with the fact that most of the characters end up liking her quickly.
Well, it goes back to we as a reader don't realize yet, but their time is running out. She's all they've got, so they can either choose to like her and move forward or not. And with the Suriel, we'll talk about it later, but the Suriel kind of knows everything.
Then you would think they would be friendly almost to the point of...
But they can't be because they can't. We're getting a little bit ahead of where our notes are, but Tamlin says to Feyre, when she discovers that they can lie to her, when she discovers that Iron does nothing, he tries to assuage her by saying, we haven't lied to you on purpose. We haven't lied to you about anything willingly. We've not willingly lied to you. Part of that curse we know as a reader is that he can't say anything. And the Suriel mentions that, but we'll get to that further on. We're going to finish up with Lucien. Worst chaperone ever.
He's a bro. I mean, he's a bro wingman. She did a good job of creating a friend for Tamlin who really just wants to help him out. Even if he has his own reasons for doing it, he's there for it.
I'm laughing because it's not the only wingman scenario we will see in her books. You will find this again in a later novel. She writes terrible chaperones. That's all I'm going to say. Lucien was the worst date chaperone ever. He didn't even go to the Starlight Pool with them. If the goal was for him to be there to make Feyre feel better, then not going to the Starlight Pool is kind of a little bit of a red flag. Not that it really mattered. I don't think that was the point of it, but like, I know.
You don't know if he was there.
He was. He was still sitting on the blanket drinking wine. He declined to go down to the Starlight Pool with them. They walked through the woods down the hill to the little Starlight Pool.
Well, maybe he showed up a little bit later and then...
No, they went back and found him. It says in the book.
Why?
I don't have my notes with the little page numbers, but I think it was page 163 or 165 where she goes, we went back up and Lucien was on the blanket with his wine still.
Well, you probably would too. If you were like, maybe I'll just go take a swim with him. You walk over there and everyone's naked. You're like, you know what? Maybe I'll just go back and finish this bottle of wine.
She wasn't naked. She was in undergarments. We'll talk about that in a minute.
But I'm just saying, like, he's going to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe I don't feel like swimming.
Which brings me to the point you made earlier when we were making our show notes. What did you say about him? He was the most interesting male character in the book so far.
Yeah, what I will give credit for is you're crafting a story. What's supposed to be this large world, but you're keeping it confined to just a couple of characters. It's really not even background characters. Like we've talked about that it's empty. There's Alice, maybe
we do see a few more servants, though.
A few other nameless servants.
Nameless.
And
I agree.
Sort of a fourth one and fifth one. Fourth one in Alice and fifth one in the Suriel. I'm sorry, I don't get why you're obsessed with the Suriel.
You will. You will. Book 2 will clarify everything for you. And then book 3, the Suriel in book 3, we can't go down that road. You haven't seen the Suriel in book 2. We're good.
Okay.
You have to understand the Suriel's character does get further development. Not necessarily in terms of a character arc per se. And I'll talk about it later. There's a whole section of this podcast today dedicated just to the Suriel because I have a minor obsession. But the Suriel is the most described character in the entirety of this book. We'll talk about it when we get to the Suriel. Anyway.
That's not true. I know a lot about Tamlin's muscles after the last few chapters.
That is true. Tamlin has lots of muscles. Corded muscles. Strong muscles. Glistening bronze, sun-kissed muscles.
And a glorious body. I actually wrote that down in quotation marks.
Body.
Glorious body.
My notes are by you, so I don't have my quotes there. I will need them because there's a couple parts at the end that I want to make note of. But talking about Tamlin, There are some moments where he's almost normal. He's like any other dude out there. He's like, hey, oh my gosh, you like to paint? Who would have thought? If you want paints, you're going to need paper and a canvas too. Paint wherever you want. This house is way too clean. It's cool. He's just like, okay, finally, you have given me something to work with. And guess
True.
what? I can work with that. And he smiles at her for the first time when he says that. And that's when she's like, oh my God, Tamlin. Tamlin. She goes kind of like molten on the inside. She goes, ooh, Tamlin. But I don't want to smile back at him, so I'm going to walk away really quick. I have to walk away. He can't see that I might be attracted to him. He can't see that. Pretty sure it's obvious.
Yeah, she's not coy. I mean,
No.
especially for someone who can like smell her fear.
That's true. That's true. We never really talk about whether or not he can smell those little like bursts of desire that she has for him. I bet he can. He's probably like, okay, I'm headed in the right direction. If I do these things, I'm headed in the right direction.
Right. Or like, you know,
and he does
sense her heartbeat.
He can't sense it. He can hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hear her heartbeat, like maybe smell the pheromones, the change of humidity in the room. You know, those sorts of things.
He's making a better effort, though. He is trying at least to befriend her. He's talking to her. He's not quite as sullen and awkward. He does have his moments, especially on their extra awkward first date, because that's what that is. That's a first date where he goes and says, we brought a blanket, and she's just enjoying the grass. She's never felt anything quite like it. She's never really had the time to enjoy it. And she said, I'm okay. I don't want to miss out on this. She doesn't say any of that to him. She just shakes her head. We get all of that. Tamlin doesn't. So he's back there with Lucien. He's like, what the fuck? And Lucien is like, just go sit with her, stupid. Just go. The wingman, right?
Yeah.
But he's trying, and saving her helps. Let's not pretend that the knight in shining armor bit doesn't work, because it does. He comes for her, and whether or not... Really?
I'm sorry.
He arrives to save her. No, arrives is still bad. Okay, we can't.
No, arrives is okay.
Does he arrive with a roar?
Well, I mean, like you.
He does. Okay. No more. He gets there and he saves her. And she even says, and a roar that did not come from the creature in front of me, the creature over me, whatever. It was a roar that shook the entirety of the forest. He yanks the Naga off her, and she just kind of lays low while he decimates everything around her. And she's kind of afraid of him for a minute, which makes sense. And then she warms up, and he takes her home. He saved her. That has an impact. And she's also now going, he's a high lord, and he found me worth saving. Well, he obviously did more than once, because he chose not to kill you when he brought you to Prythian.
Oh, she wouldn't have been very tasty. She was mostly sinew and bone. Talks about that, but
there is that. Yes, I don't think he would have eaten her. I think he would have just snapped her neck and left her in the cold if he were really going to kill her. But we know that he couldn't kill her. We know why.
No, we don't.
If you've read the entire book, you know why. But he's making more of an effort. He's really trying. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but when he's talking to her, he's saying things to her like, did anyone ever take care of you?
Yeah.
Did anybody ever do anything for you? And she's over here like, no. And I don't feel bad for it. She stopped feeling sorry for herself. And that's fine. I get that. You kind of have to. You would kind of have to shut your desires off at a certain point. You would give up at a certain point. He tells her, do they know? Do they know that it was never about the promise you made to your mother? That it was your love for them that made you sacrifice over and over again to keep them alive? Gotta say, Kersploosh. Feyre just, whether or not her character actively did anything at that moment, that right there is the moment she starts to fall for Tamlin.
Well, we can talk about that later. We can talk about it now.
We can talk about it later.
Yeah, remind me the male perspective on that.
We will. Yeah, because I have notes on it. We'll bring it back. So now we're at your perspective of Tamlin. What did you think about his character development?
He's typical stoic guy, right? I won't say he's typical stoic. I will say he's written as stoic. He has a weight of a station that he didn't ask for and or really seem to desire.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely not. He says as
he
much.
he has responsibility. I don't think he knows how to deal with it. He feels like he should act a certain way, and so he acts that way. I don't understand why he chooses that, but he does open up,
He does.
and he gets Fair to open up. She gets some emotion from him, and
I think that helps
yeah,
a lot.
although their interaction, there's something just, and I can't put my finger on it. And I've tried to. I don't know why his stoicism and his attitude just feels off to me. Like there's something that just doesn't gel. And I wish I had a better explanation for it, but it just doesn't feel right. And I don't know why.
If I had to peg a reason for that, I would say it has something to do with the fact that Sarah J. Maas spent her time trying to write him as the Beast. And to do so, she has to write him as standoffish and unwilling to engage with Feyre in the beginning. And that balance, that delicate balance of really not wanting anything to do with her, but at the same time falling in love with her, because that's what happens in Beauty and the Beast. It's kind of hard to write. The Beast was stoic, and therefore Tamlin is a little bit stoic.
I think I get what you're saying. And I think maybe the problem is the balance between you're trying to write a stoic character. And typically, when you're writing a stoic character, it's the force of the other person that's getting them to open up, not a stoic character getting someone else to open up. And I think maybe that is why it feels a little off, because it's not, if he's kind of closed down and stoic, then someone else should be trying to get him to open up. Yet in this story, it's the reverse. And
Yeah,
maybe that's it.
there's not a lot of balance with that. Feyre does ask him questions, but there aren't enough questions on her end to really justify her getting him to open up. It mostly is the other way around. Then you have Lucian in that mix too, who's spending a lot of his time also trying to get Feyre to open up. But you notice Lucian never offers anything, nothing at all. His
And
backstory comes from
yes,
Tamlin.
and I was just going to mention that the one time he opens up a little bit about his past, and that's nice. But really, his big reveal about the past is about his friend Lucian. Should have come from Lucian.
Yeah, he kind of
So
dimed out his wingman there.
so Lucian acts, in my mind, more like I would expect someone who's hundreds of years old to act. He's humorous and witty and kind of like plays both
He's a
sides.
fox.
He plays both sides, and that you expect someone who's a few hundred years old to act.
Yeah, Tamlin's prowess, his or lack thereof. I think you brought it up earlier. For someone as old as he is, he's got no riz.
I don't know what that is.
He's got no game. He's
Okay.
got nothing. You can make fun of me all you want. Sticks and stones, baby.
I'm just saying, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Our kids said the same thing. So let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about Feyre. Because of all the characters in these chapters, I think Feyre has had the most developmental changes. She's had a pretty drastic shift from I hate Fae and fairies and Prithian and everything that comes along with it. And she goes from that to, wow, Tamlin's got muscles. Mm. And some sympathy, right? She's got some sympathy for their plight. But mostly she spends her time secretly ogling Tamlin now. And then also kind of worrying about sending a letter to her family. But her thought patterns.
Well, she gives up on that shit pretty quick too.
Yeah.
Not pretty quick. She gives up on that.
And I mentioned this in the plot and world building, but she is under the impression Lucian would destroy any letters that she sends out to her family, thinking she's some sort of spy or something, which we all know that's not true, but she has that thought. So if she truly thinks that he's going to damage, sabotage, or otherwise prevent her letters from reaching her family, why try to write them in the first place? Actually, that goes into my point about her thought patterns, because she's still having some contradictory thought patterns. However, we're starting to see that her thoughts are becoming a little more streamlined. She's having a lot less back and forth with her thoughts than she was in the previous 5, 6 chapters. In the beginning, she doesn't have back and forth. Her thoughts are survival. When she gets to Prithian, she's got this kind of cognitive dissonance of, well, I saved my family and staying here allegedly keeps them safe. And the Fae can't lie to me, so my family must be safe, but also I need to escape because this is not the place for me. That allows for that wishy-washy thought pattern of that back and forth. And I had a lot of forgiveness for that in the previous 6 chapters. But as we're starting to move on and her character is changing, she's developing sympathy for the Fae, for the blight that they are experiencing, for their struggles, their hardships, their backstories. Her thought patterns need to become less wishy-washy. She needs more conviction. And we're starting to see that a little bit. She's making her decisions to stop caring about the human world a little bit more quickly. And I think it's important to note that because it's not just that she gives up on per se, but I think she's tired and she's seeing, okay, well, my family is taken care of. I can't go anywhere. The Suriel has told me as much. I have nothing to do now but paint. I have time ahead of me to develop a personality, and hobbies. That shift gives her a little bit of grace to give up more quickly on the human world. And I think Sarah J. Maas does that on purpose. I don't necessarily think she intends for her thoughts here to be wishy-washy.
So as much as you kind of talk about her change, and while I agree with you that she does have less contradictory thoughts, I have some issues with some of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
like the mapping,
I guess, in a way that it's just some sort of survival instinct. She's trying to make sense of her world and she's looking for some sort of control in a scenario where she has none.
So it's not a plot device for her to walk around the castle and run into Tamlin?
It absolutely is, but you can explain that
his
away.
Words, not mine. Totally his words. I think it makes sense for her to try to make the map.
I do, but
she gives up on it really quickly, but I think the initial thought made sense.
But we know that she can't escape, right?
And we know she doesn't really want to escape either. She even kind of mentions that when she's making the map. Not that I'm going to escape, but just in case I need these.
So I can kind of understand. Plus, she's going to be there for her life, so just exploring her surroundings.
That makes sense.
Kind of makes sense. From a human perspective, and I won't really get into the male perspective of this right away. I'll just go to the human perspective.
Okay.
You came from nothing. Life was kind of shit. Right?
She didn't come from nothing.
No, I mean immediately before. Yeah, okay, her family had money when she was a child.
Right.
But not enough to teach her how to read or write, right?
But they talk about that. They had plenty of money to teach her how to read or write. Her mom straight up neglected their studies. And then because her sisters could read and write, they opted to say that the village school was beneath them. So Feyre didn't get to go.
Stay here. What I'm saying is she came from next to nothing. She gets brought to Prithian. She can paint. She can walk around. It's beautiful. Most people would kind of adapt to that pretty quickly and be pretty happy. You'd be surprised how quickly a lot of people would be like, okay, I'm out of this crappy situation and I'm in a decent situation. I'll adapt.
No, I wouldn't. I watched Beauty and the Beast. I watched how quickly Belle was won over by a library and some talking spoons. Are you kidding me? It was instantaneous.
But, I mean, she at least came from a loving family. Her father loved her and adored her.
That is true.
Feyre came from literally, like...
the bowels of hell.
The
watery bowels of hell.
A sister that was worthless. A sister that hated her. A father that was worthless.
And potentially just tolerated her. Maybe never liked her.
I still have a problem with that. I still think that was her perspective, as in she thinks he was just tolerating her.
I'm sure.
But that may not be.
But that plays into it, right? She's a child at that point. That internalized viewpoint goes a long way. She even says it whenever she's talking to Tamlin, he was never going to come back for me. I realized it the moment the Puka's illusion was shattered. how stupid the thought was that he was going to come for me.
Wait, absolutely. Once again, I'm not making excuses. I'm talking about that particular instance. I'm not making excuses for
I can agree with that.
Papa
I
Archeron.
can see that
he's
it was her perspective that he tolerated and did not love her.
And maybe in some way he did love her before he lost everything. His dignity, respect, masculinity, his character, his purpose for being in the books is
not yet fulfilled is what it is.
Well, I'm sure he's got to die at some point. I mean, that's really the only thing he can do at this point.
I guess you'll have to read and find out. You're not going to get anything from me. You know how I feel about spoilers, like real legit spoilers. I get furious if people give them to me, and I absolutely refuse to give them to people.
If only there was this place I could go with
Don't go there.
Mass of information.
Do not do that to yourself. Don't. It will ruin it. It will ruin the books for you. The books are really good if you just read them. Don't spoil them with fan art. Don't spoil them with reading up on what happens to the characters you may or may not like. Don't do that.
That's going to be tough because I have a real passion for romantasy fan art. So I've had to block a lot of those channels.
Are you making fun of me, Riz?
Yeah. Riz?
Rizzo from Greece.
Oh.
Sorry. Deep cut, right?
I thought you were bringing up Riz again. I'm like, please stop.
No, I didn't even think about that. Sorry. No, I've got Stockard Channing on the brain and Olivia Newton-John. He making fun of me, Riz. You know, because Sandra D.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. We're married for a reason. It's been 10 years now. I would hope you would catch my reference.
I was going to say, because we both signed a paper and went to a ceremony.
10 years ago on Monday.
It's true.
Happy Veterans Day /anniversary.
Happy Veterans Anniversary.
So we'll go ahead and squeeze back to Feyre. You were saying that she's wishy-washy, that her thought process, she came from nothing.
Yeah.
You were saying she came from nothing.
And then to echo Beauty and the Beast, she goes to the library.
Yes.
She starts trying to read, and it's cute because she can't. And then she makes a list, and then she gets really butthurt that Tamlin has the list of words.
I'll just wait till you see what he does with the list of words. That's actually really cute. You'll like it. You'll think it's funny.
For character-wise, though, for an independent female character, the one thing I thought that was glossed over in like less than a paragraph was the fact that she mentions, what are they taking care of? And he explains to her how they're taken care of. They had their memories changed so that they're in this different place and that they know to run should something happen to him. She's like, well, they know they're running. He's like, well, I altered their memories. And she's like, you altered their memories? That's terrible. And he's like, well, you know what? I probably would have done this. I probably would have asked you to do it.
No. So like he goes back and he explains, right? He cannot alter their memories. He can't do that. The glamour is like a veil over their memories. So instead of being able to see their memories, it's like looking out a window and looking at a picture somebody taped over the window. So they're seeing that picture, but in theory, that could be ripped off and they could see out the window. He put a different picture there for them to see.
Well, that's not true. Because he plants a suggestion that should X happen there to run. That's not a glamour.
It is a glamour. It's not just a...
That's not a picture. That's like I'm supposed to run now because the hairy fairy told me to.
But that's what I'm saying. He can't alter their memories. That suggestion that's planted in there, you've seen the Vampire Diaries. You know what compulsion is, right? Like,
yeah, it's mind rape. He mind rapes her entire family. She's like, cool. I probably would ask you to do that anyway.
We're not going to use...
I'm sorry. Mind grape.
Okay. What I'm saying is what he's doing isn't necessarily altering their memories so much as he explains it. He's put a veil over their memories of what happened so they can't see. And we're going to touch on that later because that veil, it shifts, right? Like, that glamour comes back to bite. We're not going to give the spoilers for the end of the book, but this glamour, this specific instance of what he does for Feyre's family comes back and is spoken about again toward the end of the book. he doesn't change their memories. He can't. They have no memory of a blight in the wall in Prithian. He leaves the suggestion in there. If they hear about something pressing toward the wall, they know to run.
Yeah. He just
I'm
leaves
not
a
saying it's
suggestion.
right, okay? None of that is right.
He leaves a suggestion that if they hear of something, that they're to throw themselves in front of a carriage. It's a suggestion. He didn't force them to do it.
However, this is romantasy. This is the morally gray male character that we haven't really seen yet, but we wished we kind of had. This is pretty much the closest we come to Tamlin being the book boyfriend. He makes that decision for her in her best interest so that she can feel safe and secure and peace of mind that her family is taken care of. Because honestly, does Tamlin give two shits about her family? The point is, he does not necessarily do that for her family. He does it, one, because he feels like it's the right thing to do, which is good. That's definitely a green flag. But two, he does it for Feyre's peace of mind, and he does it in any way he can, which is where the moral gray area comes in. And that's what makes him attractive to female readers. But we'll pop on to that later. Here we are. Feyre has begun to open up. She's kind of still wishy-washy, right? The whole glamour thing is kind of off-putting because she's a strong, independent female character, and
it's off-putting for 3 sentences.
But it was off-putting enough that you mentioned it.
No, I'm saying off-putting for her for 3 sentences.
Oh, yeah. She kind of thinks about it and says, you know what, had I known you could do it, I might have asked you to change their memories. For her, though, that instant, I think, was out of love. I think she wouldn't want them to be living in fear of what was happening to her. She would want them to go on with their lives. Not that they fucking deserve it at all, but that's where her mindset was. And I think maybe that's why it was so easy for her to say, okay, well, had I known you could do it, I might have asked you to do it anyway, and that's enough for me to get over it. As a reader, it's off-putting, but I can sort of understand the thought process.
Yeah, but I think in a way that's kind of self-serving for her, because then she doesn't have to worry about them even thinking about her. So it's kind of like they make it.
I'm gonna say it, unpopular opinion, maybe hot take, but she has earned the right to not have to think about their lazy, selfish asses. They did not lift a finger while she went out into the woods. She could barely even get Nesta to chop wood. I do not blame our girl Feyre for not giving two shits if they're taken care of and just taking the word of the fairy after however many times he's told her now. What, 6, 7? I'm good with it. At this point as a reader, it's been brought up enough that I know that it was a concern in her head and she's now like, okay, I need to move on.
That's not a hot take. A hot take would have been like, I appreciate that, but you could have just asked them to walk into the ocean. That's a hot take.
I mean,
or to fight each other to the death. A suggestion.
We could do without Elaine.
It's just a veil. A veil to fight each other to the death.
We could do without Elaine. If Elaine wanted to just subsist only on vegetables, I would be fine.
I'm just saying.
Oh wait, she didn't grow any.
We've gotten kind of hung up on Feyre. She is the main character.
She starts to show compassion toward fairies. That's a big thing, right? It's not just remorse because she feels like maybe what she did was wrong. She shows genuine compassion now toward fairies. Toward the Suriel. That's the first fairy that she shows genuine compassion for. She ensnared it. She got attacked by the Naga. Her first arrow fired was to free the Suriel.
She Prince of Thieves that shit.
She freed the Suriel.
You can't even appreciate that?
Good choice, Feyre. Yes, I appreciate. It's also a very wonderful Robin Hood reference.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say she Robin Hooded it.
She did. She Robin Hooded it.
But no, but you know that Robin Hooding it with a bow and arrow means putting your arrow
in another arrow
through the back of
your arrow. Which you have done. You have done that. So proud of you.
Not on purpose. Not on purpose. I mean, I was aiming for the same spot, but not the back of an arrow.
Still really fucking cool. But she does. She starts to show more compassion, and it starts with the Suriel. And then we move on, and she starts, before that fairy shows up, before the Summer Court fairy, Tamlin, very smoothly, might I add, it's the only smooth moment he's had so far in the book, is telling her that she's sacrificed so much for her family and that he sees that. And in that instant, she thinks about how much he has sacrificed because of the things she's heard. He doesn't want to be the High Lord. He is the High Lord. He was never expecting to be the High Lord, but wound up that way. And we know that High Lord's powers pass because Tamlin himself mentions that Lucian was eligible to be High Lord, not because it passes down to the eldest, but to the strongest. We also now know that Tamlin was the strongest or last in his lineage, and he wound up with that mantle unwillingly. He was never training for that. It wasn't his goal. She sees that, and she sees how he goes out killing all of these things that wind up on his land, and she sees that and says, I feel bad for you. That's a big step for her.
Yeah. She does. She shows compassion, especially, and we'll talk about that in the plot, the Summer Court Fairy, which I thought was a very good scene. Otherwise, her wit becomes less biting and more playful, which is appreciative.
He also told me, you like to be brushed, and if I'm a good girl, I'll train you with treats.
Yes.
That was funny. I'm sorry, but I laughed out loud when I read that. And this is my 7th read through of these books, and I still laugh out loud when I read that. That was a golden line. That was really good.
It was okay.
I love that. It's the first time she makes any kind of joke in the series, and it's actually a decent joke. It's funny. It's funny.
And then they go on their date, and she goes from
the world's most awkward date.
She goes from bitter to joking to naked.
Not naked. She has undergarments.
Naked. She has like thin linen garments that she gets in the water with. She's naked.
Anyway, she does. And she, honestly, I made a note about this in my notes too. It's not that she strips down. It's a plot device at this point. Not a plot device, but the plot needs to move forward. She needs to overcome that bump. So she uses the swimming scene as a way to put it all out there. Okay. Literally. Okay, that's fine. But yes, she's getting naked in front of him. I would expect as she's getting naked for him to watch, and that's fine. But that's not what's happening here. As she's getting naked, I mean, he's watching her, but then she just stands there in front of him and she's just staring at him. And he takes that moment to slowly look her down and up. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, that is not what would have happened in that particular scenario. He has been super awkward and very inarticulate when it comes to flirting with her thus far. Honestly, even though he had some cute lines like, ooh, I bet both of us could use a glass because legend says that you'll be happy until your last breath if you drink the water. Even though he kind of flirts with her, what would make you happy? I still can't picture Tamlin because she set him up as a stoic, kind of clumsy, awkward, at flirting fairy. I can't picture him very brazenly looking her up and down. I can't picture it.
Well, maybe it's this finally his age catches up with him and he realizes he's a 500-year-old fairy and he's like, oh wait, no, I do know how to deal with the opposite sex. Maybe that's what happens.
Maybe. We're going to move on to the plot and world building section. We talked about the letters a little bit. Mm-hmm. We talked about how, she mentions that she can't ask for help to write them because she can't write. She can talk just fine. She can sort of read, but some of them she can't pronounce. And honestly, it's funny because they're audiobook readers who don't know how to spell words, but they're readers reading these books going, how the fuck do I pronounce this shit? Kale, Sarah J. Maas, if you ever watch this, Kale, really? The pronunciation guide doesn't come in the new release of your books, okay? I read them. I didn't listen to the audiobook. That would have been nice to know. And I should have known better because I can speak Irish. Moving on, while she's working on writing this letter, she's in the study and she gets frustrated and she steps away from the letters and she finds the mural. And I have to say, in some ways, it's almost kind of lazy, but also it's fitting with her character that she would be interested in the mural because she's set Feyre up that she likes to paint.
Right.
And to tell the story of Prythian, which we don't know, and I guess in a way Feyre doesn't know, rather than being info dumping, it becomes meaningful exposition because she's connecting to that history through a medium that she enjoys, that she is set up to be adept at in some way, although that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense either. And then we also see Highburn on the map, which she does mention later, but she talks about the island over there that
Scotland.
doesn't. No, Highburn is a part of Ireland. But she talks about that island, and that island has not ceded any territory to humans. So she kind of throws that little bone to us, and later Feyre recognizes it when the Suriel is talking. That island that gave up no territory, that was ruled by a king, is Highburn. If you're looking for it, it should.
No, I'm saying it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's above where the wall is. For some inexplicable reason, the wall.
Well, all of the territory that was on the mural is above the wall, because the wall is just a smear and nothing below it was painted because it didn't make the cut.
What I'm saying is, if this map is true, the wall literally goes on the same latitude all the way across the world. So Highburn is above that. It would make sense that they didn't cede any territory to humans just based on, it looks like the wall is just literally a slice across the latitude.
Yes, but I honestly feel like Highburn was just drawn that way because it ceded no territory to humans. But that's neither here nor there.
That's fair.
So there was that. That was a cool little bit of world building I really appreciated, and exposition that wasn't just dumping.
Let's go back. I'm going to reel you back to letters. I'm Farah. I need to get a message to my family. I can't have one of the fairies help me because they'll read it and they'll destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to write a letter. When I am done with that letter, what am I going to do?
I thought the same thing.
Carrier pigeon?
I don't know.
Email?
She said she was going to give it to Tamlin and see if he would get it there.
Fax?
Tamlin wouldn't destroy it.
Fox? She's going to fox it?
No, she can't fox it. She thinks the fox is going to destroy it because he thinks she's a spy.
That was a Robin Hood Men in Tights reference. So I've referenced 2 different Robin Hood movies tonight.
All right. I'm going to spin you back forward now because I don't want to beat the letters to death.
The mural was good.
The mural was great. I liked it. Honestly, as a writer, it's really hard to find good ways to give exposition. And I felt like that was a really creative way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. That was a good way to do it.
Now, moving forward, we have Feyre trying to ensnare the Suriel.
Yes.
Lucien tells her that she needs a freshly killed chicken. Pray tell, do you think a chicken could snap its own neck in tree roots, trying to get loose from a tree root?
It wouldn't surprise me. Chickens are dumb.
Chickens are dumb, but they're not snap your neck dumb.
It didn't bother me that much.
I don't know. It's
like
just
the Suriel's not going to question it.
Kind of funny.
Suriel's like, oh, it's that chicken.
The Suriel is not going to question it, but we're going to talk about that in the Suriel.
Well, then we better hurry it up.
Of this.
Not focus on the chicken's neck snapping.
Ha ha. Okay. Can we also just talk about the way Feyre describes books? Tell me you hate books without telling me you hate books.
I don't hate books, but
no.
Maybe I
Feyre,
will soon.
If you're Feyre, tell me you hate books without telling me you hate books and reading. Decaying rot of the pages, mocking whisper of pages. She does not like the book. She goes in the library and she says that it smells like the decaying rot of the pages. If you love books, you do not describe books this way. I have an unhealthy obsession with the smell of books, and I prefer for my shelf trophies to have a distinctive smell. That's why I both love and do not love my Kindle. I love the smell of books. I could never, ever describe something that I loved as the smell of decaying rot. And it hurt my heart a little bit.
She can't read.
I know that, but do you have to hate on the books that badly? Come on. Okay.
And she's reading children's books. So in my mind, when I pictured the scene, she's like got like a Dr.
Llama.
It's like a Dr. Seuss book. And she's like, this decaying filth.
I mean, like, one of the words on her list is conflagration. So, like, tell me how that word ends up in a children's book. I just need to know. Can we, please? How does conflagration end up in a children's book? Or Q? I guess Q would make a little more sense. But if it's a children's book, they would just say line. They would just say line. Line of people, not a queue. Anyway.
Well, which makes you think, this is one of those things that, when you think about, how does a fairy growing up not age up until they're like 50, 75 years old? And then I think about having kids, and then I think about being a parent, and then for 25 years trying to work on like the same book because they take so long to mature and having to read the same bedtime story for 30 years.
No. No. See, Feyre has nightmares about killing fairies, but that sounds like a nightmare I would have. Please do not make me read the same book over and over and over again to my children for 30 years.
I'm just saying.
It sounds like torture.
Just 30 years of children's books.
So I'm gonna pop in there while we're talking about books and writing books even. Sarah J. Maas likes to use some repeated phrases, and the first time we see a couple of these phrases is in chapter 14. When Feyre goes to ensnare the Suriel, she mentions a phantom breeze. This phrase will crop up more than once. It's either phantom breeze or phantom wind. We are tally number 1 right now. Watery bowels. Surprisingly, doesn't crop up as often as many people think it crops up, but it's an awkward enough phrase that it really stands out, and we are at tally number 1 of watery bowels. We're going to talk here. So this is more about Tamlin than about the Suriel, because we do talk about the Suriel later, but during chapter 14, when Feyre ensnares the Suriel, we find out that Tamlin is High Lord. Most of us already knew that, right? You can kind of see it coming. We hear the distinct phrasing because he cannot give Feyre answers. You sought me out because he cannot give you answers. Cannot. Not will not give you answers, but Tamlin cannot give you answers. And then very shortly after, in chapter 16, we hear Tamlin say, I never willingly lied to you. He can't give her answers. He can't tell her what's going on with the blight, but he could lie to her, and he had to because he had to try to find a way around the blight. The blight is a lie. There is no blight. The blight is a person, but he can't say that. So we, for the first time as a reader, are hearing, okay, Tamlin has lied. Tamlin cannot tell the truth. It's not that he's unwilling to share information. He cannot share it. And that's a really important distinction.
Well, sometimes cannot mean like he's just incapable of it, not necessarily because something is stopping him, but it may be himself.
Yes and no. You can read it that way now. If you've never read the books, it makes sense to read it either way right now. But when you get to the end of the book, that wording becomes very important.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying like in the now, that can be interpreted 2 ways, which is nice. Like he cannot show a personality.
Well, if the shoe fits, that's all I'm saying. Speaking of personality, Alice and her personality, her snark gives me life. It is amazing. Alice's snark is levels of petty and snarky that I aspire to, quite frankly.
No, it's not that. She says 0 fucks to give. And
she's snarky. She's snarky kind of like Lucian, but in a way that's much more free because she has nothing to lose with Feyre. Her relationship has no stakes with Feyre.
That's why I like her.
I do too.
So the thing with her is she's just tired of Feyre's shit. She's not playing games.
No, and you really see that when she straight up word vomits on Feyre later in the book. Toward the end, right before the big shift in setting, Alice just kind of word vomits on Feyre, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
honestly.
It's like, oh, you thought you were getting away with going to the cereal? No, we all knew.
Yeah, we all knew what the hell you were doing.
We just didn't stop you because we're kind of sort of hoping you died.
No, because they all know what's at stake too.
Yeah, but no one stopped her.
No, because they were hoping that if she ensnared the Suriel would tell her what they couldn't tell her. But we don't know that yet as the reader. So
that still seems like a big gamble.
It is a pretty big gamble, but it's one that they're willing to make at this point. They're running out of time.
That's true. They probably don't like her that much. They're like, yeah, I'm willing to make the sacrifice.
So we find out that the Fae can't lie and iron doesn't work. We've talked about that. We've talked about the implications of that because up until then, even though she thought the Fae couldn't lie, she still kind of wasn't taking them at their word. So nothing really changes with that other than the fact that Feyre is incredibly fucking embarrassed and feels really stupid.
Understandable, I guess.
It is understandable, but I mean, it's almost comical that she has that kind of reaction when she never believed the things they were saying in the first place.
And one thing that I did notice, and I kind of appreciate, is that her fables about, or stories about fairies are similar to ours, isn't like the iron and not being able to lie. But it's a good way of showing that these are the rules in this world by giving fair knowledge of our rules and then contrasting that with the
what the
reality.
reality is. It is
I
cool.
kind of like that. That's kind of neat.
I did too. We already talked about Tamlin's first move. We talked about Tamlin and how I felt like he was wooing Feyre for the first time. I felt like him telling her that he sees her, that he sees her sacrifice, that it's a big deal. And that's where she really starts to fall for him, whether she admits it consciously or not. But I want to kind of point out that Feyre probably eventually would have been won over by kindness and safety. She was already starting to be won over by kindness and safety. We see her start to make the adjustment to life in Prythian. We see her start to warm up a little bit and feel empathy for their plight. We're seeing that as he's kinder to her, she notices it. She makes a point of saying that he's being kinder to her. He's making an effort to be kind to her. She is safe there. I mean, as long as she doesn't leave the grounds at night, but she's safer there than she was at home. She's well fed. She's cared for. She's clothed. She has servants to bathe her. For all intents and purposes, right now, this is important to note that this is what happiness really kind of looks like for Feyre. She says at the Starlight Pool she would need to drink the entire pool and it still probably wouldn't be enough to be happy, but
How fucking emo.
but for somebody who spent their life just trying to survive, being kept, being well fed, being cared for, having no real worry or responsibility goes a long way to making someone happy. And I feel like eventually that would have won her over. And if Tamlin had had the time, he wouldn't have needed to awkwardly flirt the way he did. But I think that by observing and acknowledging her sacrifice for her family and all that she did for her family and bringing that to her attention, I really think that that's where she was just like, because it's not just that. Right after that, he smiles at her. They have an exchange that's genuine where he grins at her. And she said, Isaac had never smiled at me like that, never made my breath catch. And so she's saying basically that he is the first dude she's ever been attracted to just to be attracted to them. Like she's looking at him and he's making her breath catch. She fucked Isaac regularly for a couple of hours, as she made it seem. They would spend a couple of stolen hours together. Okay, that's some stamina there. All right.
Oh, I don't think most of that was.
But the point is, they had these trysts for a couple of hours. So she spent a good deal of time with him because they had them fairly often. I mean, with some frequency, she mentions. Sometimes they would go a while without seeing each
months,
other. But they still had a fair amount of frequency to these trysts. And she's saying, I never experienced this with Isaac.
That's a pretty low bar, though.
I know that, but it's an important distinction for Feyre because she hasn't experienced it. The attraction is harder to distinguish between attraction and emotion. You can be very physically attracted to somebody and fancy yourself in love with them, but not really know them. We see that with people who have crushes on celebrities or crushes on, a guy in high school that you think you know him, but like then he opens his mouth and you're like, you were really cute and I thought I was like in love with you, but wow, you're so dumb. That has maybe not happened to me once or twice. Tamlin then offers her friendship. She says, I don't think I need to vent or, to just talk to anybody. And he says, well, what about a friend? Like, what if I'm your friend? And honestly, I feel like from Tamlin, that offer might have been kind of genuine because he's trying at least to progress in a normal way. And Feyre just goes from hatred to lust and complicated feelings.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the smell perspective, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, to point out, the beginning of chapter 17 starts off with her dreaming about killing the Naga and being attacked by a female fairy. And I think it's kind of something to point out because you mentioned before, she had her first dream of killing fairies, and it seems to be something she dreams of frequently. It's brought up not once now, but twice, and it will be brought up again later. We've already talked about Lucian as the awkward chaperone. And I have to say this, okay? Why is the Starlight Pool in the fucking Spring Court? Why is it not in Valaris where it belongs? If you don't know what Valaris is, let me know when you get to the second book. Why is the Starlight Pool not in the city of Starlight? Okay.
Because it's the city of Starlight. Seems redundant.
But there should be a Starlight Pool there. It does not belong in the Spring Court. Okay.
It's just foreshadowing. Just let it be foreshadowing.
I know, but it just bothers me. Why does Tamlin get access to a Starlight Pool? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Why is it in the Spring Court? It's my personal hang up, okay?
Because it still turns night in the Spring Court. Like, night still happens.
Okay. Do stars fall in the Spring Court?
Probably.
No, they don't. Spoiler alert. There's no starfall in the Spring Court. Anyway, the other thing that we learned that moves the plot forward was the fairies fighting in the war on the humans' side.
Yeah. Well, you finally get a reason for them to have not lost. Because the mural shows fairies, humans laying dead. And then you think, well, then how did they win? And then you find out it's because fairies join the side of the humans.
It makes sense. I mean, humans can't really hold their own against a species that is stronger, faster, smarter. They've been alive a lot longer than humans, so they've had a lot more experience and time to strategize. So, yeah, how did the humans survive?
Other fairies. Traitor fairies.
Traitor fairies? They're not traitors. They were fighting against tyranny, no matter who that was. That's what Tamlin says. That's what wins her over, right? I would fight against tyranny no matter whose rights I was fighting for. Yeah. I was too young to fight in the war, but I would have fought on the side of the humans because it was the right thing to do.
Big words for someone who has no skin in the game. You talk so much about, I don't want to talk about spoilers, but big words for someone when the time comes, doesn't have the gumption to actually put his balls on the line and fight. So
I never said that I was a big fan of Tamlin.
No, I'm just saying, like, those are big words for someone who doesn't have.
They are big words for somebody who does not have the balls to back them up. Now we're going to talk about the Suriel. So on page 137, we finally learn that the Suriel is a he. Feyre mentions him as a he. I'm assuming that means Sarah J. Maas sees him as a he. So from now on, when you hear me talk about the Suriel, if I say he, it's because I read he on page 137 in my book. It is important to note that the Suriel says stay with the High Lord. And there's some double entendre there. There's a lot of parsing of this particular phrase in later books. In this particular instance, stay with the High Lord and everything will be okay. You won't come to harm. Everything will be righted. She just finds out Tamlin is a High Lord. If she would just stay with him, everything would work out. And so we're going to see later whether or not she stays with him and whether or not shit works out. But it's important to go ahead and highlight, bookmark, whatever you want to do with that phrase. Just remember it for future reference. I also want to say that he knows everything, right? The Suriel knows everything. That's why people trap him. That's why people go out of their way to ensnare one of the Suriel. Their kind knows everything. Mm-hmm. You mean to tell me that the Suriel did not know that he was walking into a trap?
Maybe he did.
I think he did. I think he foresaw that Feyre would need the help and that he just walked right in to give it to her. And since we see the Suriel in later books, I personally think that the Suriel went to Feyre and then judged her worthy. And from there on was like, I'm going to help you. And then after she saved its life, that was like, bam. It was the coup de grace. Well, after that, the Suriel was a Feyre fan.
Well, the Suriel knew that she was going to.
Did it, though?
Well, if he knows everything, right?
I mean, his panic seemed pretty real for someone who didn't know everything. I wonder if the Suriel knows everything except for...
the future?
No,
it obviously knows the
future. Because he says, stay with the High Lord and everything will be seen righted. I think that the Suriel knows everything except for what's going to happen when he's ensnared.
I think the Suriel just knows everything. And it's the beauty as a writer, if you're writing an omniscient or omnipotent character. Like
the Suriel. I think
you can explain everything because that's the way they planned it, right? Like the Suriel knew that Feyre was going to be there. The cereal could have planted the legend that Lucian knew
It
to
could have.
tell Farah.
I think that he picks and chooses who he lets catch
But I'm
him.
just saying, like, how many 3D, 4D, 5D chests do you want to say? Because you literally could justify, right? Like,
I'm aware.
they can go so far as them planting the seeds, like the Bene Gesserit and Dune, like generations ago, to get to this point that this cereal would end up in a snare to give enough information to Farah to get her to the next point.
To where it can give more information to her.
Yeah. I'm going to start referring to the cereals as Bene Gesserit now. I think that makes sense.
No, I mean, it even looks like it. It's got the hooded robe figures and stuff, other than the whole skeletal appearance. But I think that the cereal picks and chooses who he lets catch him. I think he does. I think he sees and shapes the future based on what he wants to see, and that's it.
You have to, right? You can't have it both ways.
No, I agree. So we wanted to touch on the deceiver. The cereal mentions when he is explaining to Feyre that Hybern had these commanders and one of them disobeyed him. One of them went off script, and that general was known as the deceiver. That's where we get interrupted with the Naga.
Yeah, someone went off the reservation, went against the king 50 years ago, which will come up later.
Right.
Well, I mean, we know who it is now, but at this point...
We won't say the name. We will not say the name until we learn it.
Voldemort.
Wrong name.
Palpatine. Sauron.
Anyway, I think it's important that they say the deceiver. That has to come into play. That is an important word choice. It's a very specific word choice.
That's how you know the cereal's a he, because he refers to the female character as the deceiver.
Really? That's what you're going with?
Yeah, that's what I'm going with.
All right, since we're going to talk about male perspective, what is your take on Tamlin as a book boyfriend?
What I think I like about Tamlin, and this is going to be a hot take, Farah is from a crappy background. Some might say she has dad issues. Farah ends up as a huntress. She gets taken in by Tamlin, who shows her compassion, a little bit of understanding, and some kindness, and she just eats it up because she has known none of it before. And it's pretty typical.
It really is true. And she talks about that later.
To come from that and like going back on the second read of it now, you can really see it. Is he a good guy? I mean, yeah, he's not a bad person at this point, but
yeah, I don't think he's doing it on purpose.
Well, he's not trying to manipulate her. He's not like, well, okay,
he wants her to fall in love with him because of the curse, right? We already know that. If you finish the book, you already know that. But I don't think that it's malice.
No, he's not like some player, right? Like he doesn't have like 15 Farahs living in the castle that don't know each other. But ... I think at 500 years old, he probably knows if he's like, I have to find some girl. This girl has to fall in love with me, and then he sees her background. He's probably like, okay,
well,
I can do this.
Let's be honest. I mentioned this in the first section, or maybe just the second section. He doesn't even believe that it's Feyre. Nesta is beautiful, and she is not worn down like Feyre is by life. So, like, when he goes into that cabin, he's casting around looking like, really, anyone but you. Anyone but you. Like, she's not his first choice. That's what it felt like.
He's like one of those Andrew Tate subscribers who's like, you kind of insult the girl first, and then that makes her like you a little bit more.
I guess.
Oh, man. I didn't even look at it that way. Thanks for bringing that up. Wow, that's cold-blooded.
He was like, there's no way that it was you. There's no way that I don't want it to be you.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you're going to say he's like that kind of guy, he's just going to like insult her. Or like you're like that backhanded compliment, right? Like,
oh, yeah. Oh, you would look great in that dress.
Yeah. I mean,
if it were a different color.
Yeah. Something. Like, I guess it looks okay.
Yeah.
It's not what I would have picked, but you know.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't let's preface this like, I don't think this is appropriate. I don't necessarily believe these things. I'm just saying, like,
no.
As a guy, like, you can kind of see
what kind of guy another male is.
Yeah. Like, you could see that, like, it's not as...
He's kind of giving off a specific kind of ick that you don't recognize right away because you're so focused on the Beauty and the Beast of it all.
Yeah. It makes sense how easy that transition is because of where she came from and what she has now.
Yeah.
Like
it's really easy to see what he can offer her.
He literally Pretty Womans her out of the human world.
He does, yes. There is kissing though. So
That's true.
Not very Richard Gere of him violating that rule. I agree. I think he can. I don't know if he necessarily can see it or if he just innately hones in on the fact that he is providing something that Feyre does not have.
Yeah.
And because she's never really been in love with anybody or seen great examples of what love is, she looks at that and sees love. She sees somebody willing to care for her for a change and mistakes that for love.
Right, because love is
caring for someone else.
But love is not just caring for someone else.
But to her it is. That's all she does for her family. She sacrifices everything to care for her family. So for her, love is caring for someone else. And Tamlin being willing to care for her, to serve her food, to help her when she's injured, to come for her when she's in danger, that is love to her.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Sacrificing for someone else's love. I mean, Tamlin was never in any real danger when he fought the Naga. Like no. They stood zero chance of
that is correct
hurting him in any way, shape, or form. But in some ways, that's kind of a traditional masculine ideal, right? Love is sacrificing of yourself for other people.
Yeah. For us, right now, he's the ideal book boyfriend because he's the beast. He's kind of awkward, brooding. He's emotionally inaccessible at the beginning. And what girl doesn't love an I can fix him trope? I can get him to open up to me. I can understand him. I can get him to be vulnerable. I can show him that somebody cares about those parts of him that other people don't see or care about.
That's a female thing.
It is. It really is. No, you guys have a Nikki Mendoza curve and you guys hit it hard.
Well, no, if we're talking about tropes, the traditional male trope is to be the knight in shining armor, right? To be the savior,
No, I'm talking about the type of girl you're attracted to. We, as females, see a man and we're attracted to, well, not all of us. I don't know if I was ever that way. It's possible.
I know, because you're going to have to walk this back as you're standing here with your husband. Otherwise,
well, I mean,
I can fix him.
I wasn't attracted to you for that reason, but that's the reason why previous relationships didn't work out, right? We weren't compatible. You were looking for different things or saw different things or grew apart. I think I did definitely at least one time date a guy and say, okay, I can fix him. It's a thing that a lot of women go through and experience. They see a guy who has a specific problem and we think that we can fill that role.
Oh, no, I have in my past dated a girl that I thought like I could save her from something. Not necessarily Naga. I'm always looking for Naga, but I've yet to find any. I've seen a couple people that are pretty close, but...
Oh, ouch. But still, I mean, it makes sense. As females, we're attracted to that person who's willing to do those things. We're attracted to the knight in shining armor. We're attracted to the person who says, oh no, I see your independence. You don't need me to take care of you, but I want to. And that's a big deal especially here for Feyre. She's never been taken care of, so somebody being willing to take care of her is a huge friggin' deal.
Well, what you just said is the difference between immature and mature love, right? Like the difference of I want someone to save me and protect me versus I want someone who would want to do that and recognize that I don't necessarily need it. That's the switch, right? Like the switch for a guy is I don't feel like I need to save you, but I want you to know that I would, right? Like,
right. We see this later in Feyre's relationship. She finds this later down the road. It doesn't come right away in the beginning of the book. And she's 19. So realistically that it comes at all for her in the next few books is kind of astounding because I know at 19, I did not have that kind of... I also didn't live in a fantasy world where I was forced to grow up too fast. So there's that. But
it's true.
I did not have the kind of wherewithal to recognize a mature love at 19. I can kind of give her the pass on not really recognizing that someone taking care of her for once is baseline and not like an aspiration.
Well, it's the flashiness of it too, right? Like,
It's
it's not
new, it's
just taking
shiny.
care of her. It's taking her from abject poverty to like a mansion
But that's not the
with
shit she cares
servants.
about. I mean, like, none of that stuff really has any impact on her day to day life. The amount of money he has doesn't really seem to have a lot of impact unless you're talking about the amount of food he can provide or the paints that he
Yes.
supplies.
Yes. Oh, really? Those paints didn't factor in. The gallery doesn't factor in.
Right, but those things don't necessarily factor. At this point, she hasn't received either of those things.
Yes, but I'm saying like it all. It's the promise of the
Yes,
paints.
there's a lot of it.
It's the being able to take the horse ride to the Starlight Pond and
Yeah.
the picnic. And I'm not saying she's superficial. I'm just saying like this all factors in. If he was like,
Well, I mean, it's not really superficial at this point because it's kind of, she's never even seen it before. It's not something she ever necessarily aspired to,
yeah,
but it is dazzling.
and he rolls up on his magic carpet with his.
No, that's Aladdin.
Oh,
No, he literally rolled up as a different fucking form. He was an animal.
kind of. Yeah.
No, he not kind of. He was an animal. He
Well,
had shapeshifted into some sort of beast.
I don't know a feline horned animal.
So he's a fey animal. How about we say it that way? Because we learn more about the High Lords and their different forms in later books. So there's two notes that I want to pay attention to in these chapters. The first thing is going to be the Suriel, the stay with the High Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It is important to listen to what the Suriel says and pay attention to the wording of what he says. Because at this moment, stay with the High Lord does mean Tamlin. At the very least, staying with Tamlin, her family is taken care of. If she stays with him, she has a higher chance of falling for him. And also, just she's safer closer to him. The literal definition of stay with the High Lord, if she had not strayed from the castle, she wouldn't have been anywhere near the Naga or the Suriel. But to be fair, it's both a literal definition here and a figurative definition. But I also really want to draw attention to the dream that Feyre had because she is not just having this dream about killing the Naga. In this dream, there is a female fairy who is demanding that she tell her her name. And this fairy, this is on page 148. It's the very beginning of chapter 17. You hand me your book? I'll read the direct quote. She's dreaming about this, and the fairy that she's dreaming about is a pale, faceless woman dragging her blood red nails across Feyre's throat, splitting her open bit by bit. She kept asking for my name, but every time I tried to speak, my blood bubbled out of the shallow wounds on my neck, choking me. It's important to remember that for a couple of reasons. I cannot delve into that right now, but that quote, hang on to that. And then at the end of the book, that quote is going to make a lot of sense. Not only will we meet the pale faceless woman, but we also have a little inkling of how she might have gotten that dream in the first place because Feyre has no magic. Feyre has no magic as a human, none whatsoever. She is mentioned that there's no magic beneath the wall. She is experiencing magic because they mention this magic tang over and over again, and she can smell it, see it, sense it. She does not have magic. So how does this dream, which comes into play later, how does it get to her? I wanted to make sure that that gets noted here in our podcast.
Did the humans used to have magic?
I do not believe so. No, all the magic they had actually came from the fairies themselves. Even the human queens, the magic that they have is granted to them from other fae. But the human queen's magic isn't mentioned until book 2. Any other thoughts or hot takes you wanted to add before we sign off here?
No, I think that's about it. Overall, we get some movement in these chapters, so that's good. A little bit of world building, some character growth, and we kind of move the plot forward.
Yes. I like where we're at right now. It's not as slow as the last 5 chapters, but it's not as fast as the end of the book. And the end of the book is going to bring some some speed to this story. It's going to pick up really quickly, very suddenly too. So, what's so
It's
funny?
going to be very quickly and very suddenly.
Sarah J. Maas is known for the last 100 pages of her book. So, anyway, if you enjoyed our episode tonight, please like it, subscribe, turn the little bell on so you get the notifications when we update every Monday. Please share it. Share our episodes, share our show page, go to our social media, share our posts, tell your friends, tell your family. We also want to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely send comments because, sometimes it feels like we're just talking to the abyss. It'd be nice to hear back from you, even if it's like,
even if you just answer the poll.
Yeah, we're just like, I hate that guy. I hate his beer choice.
Or
he's incredibly handsome, and I wish I knew somebody like him.
Clay's not watching this.
Oh, well.
If you liked it, let us know. If you have any comments, let us know. If you wanted to add to or argue with any of the points that we've discussed, please leave us a comment. Send us a comment on social media, leave a comment on the show page, wherever you can find us. We take comments and we'll talk about them in our next episode. We're happy to bring up whatever points you bring up to our attention.
And if you want to be credited for it, just let us know. And
yeah, we're happy to credit you too. And tell us what you think of the show. Are we hitting points that you enjoy listening to? Are we kind of off base? Do you want to hear more about a specific topic? We're happy to adjust based on what you guys want to hear. So anyway, thanks for listening and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the show, and share. You can connect with us on any of our social media accounts or leave us a comment. If there's anything you want to hear us talk about, reach out and let us know. We look forward to you tuning in next week.